Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. So in this video, we're going to take on what happens when you're married or you're in a long-term relationship with a narcissistic person and you get blamed for their behavior. Let's take that on. There are multiple indignities to being married to a narcissistic person. Not just the manipulation and invalidation and gaslighting and hypervigilance, but because of the nature of this personality style and their capacity to look wonderful or at least normal to the world, it can take a long time for anyone to recognize from the outside that something is not right, and it may take you a long time to recognize that something is not right. What I am about to describe is something that came up initially in, I would say, the 1950s and even in the early 1960s in women's magazines, and still happens to people in narcissistic marriages and in long-term relationships. At that time, marriage was only recognized between men and women, and as a rule, women were not employed outside the home. You want a better look at this? Watch Mad Men and Don Draper's first wife to get a handle on this. And women were told in these women's magazines how to be better, how to greet a husband after a long day in the office, how to never complain, how to be perfectly pretty when their spouse walked in the door, how to ensure the kids were not fussing, how to keep the house antiseptically clean, how to make sure that you could see your reflection in the kitchen floor. Basically, what these women's magazines were writing about and teaching these women to do was to how to not exist and live fully in the service of their spouse. These articles were basically a manual on subjugation and enabling narcissism, and even telling people it was good for them and aren't you lucky to be in this marriage. So it took a little while to distance a little bit from that toxic stuff historically. But the thing that has not changed is that we still talk to people who may be struggling in a marriage or a long-term committed relationship. And we will still challenge them to look inward and ask them to change themselves. We ask people who are in dysfunctional or toxic relationships, what are you contributing to this dynamic? And the other thing that happens is that the non-narcissistic partner or spouse will often be questioned or even blamed for their narcissistic partner's behavior. So, what could this look like? It could look like a partner being questioned for why they cannot keep their rude, nasty, entitled partner in line. It's as though their narcissistic partner is like a child that they should be able to control in public. It could look like a partner being questioned about whether they are being too demanding or difficult or somehow a problem, or it is assumed that the spouse or partner is these things as a way to explain why a narcissistic partner is behaving badly. It's basically an assumption that the non-narcissistic spouse or partner is literally provoking the narcissistic person's behavior. It can look like people looking to the non-narcissistic partner or spouse to control the narcissistic person's behavior, and even getting frustrated at the spouse or partner for not being able to do that. It can look like people being put off or even avoiding the spouse or partner of a narcissistic person because the narcissistic person has behaved rudely or in an entitled manner or just badly, and it becomes a sort of guilt by association thing. It can look like people putting the spouses and partners of narcissistic people in the impossible position of judging them for staying in the relationship or saying, well, it can't be that bad or they wouldn't have stayed, and then assuming that the spouse or partner who stays isn't seeing how bad it is and are part of the problem. So basically, it is the person who's in the narcissistic relationship, who is already enduring lots of abuse and being questioned as to whether they are to blame for their spouse's narcissistic behavior, as though a spouse or partner is literally supposed to be in a parental role and control their narcissistic partner's behavior, or is being blamed for being the reason that the narcissistic person is behaving badly. It's basically a gaslighting multiplier. And it can also multiply the grief, the confusion, and the anxiety that people experience in narcissistic relationships. For reasons that remain still a tiny bit mysterious to me, there is a strange zeal in the world to try and defend or understand the narcissistic person's behavior, as though it is more important to make excuses for a person's bad behavior than to possibly understand the harm it could be causing to the other person in the relationship. And part of making those excuses is to question the long-term partner of the narcissistic person. Please know that if you have been in this situation, in a narcissistic long-term relationship, marriage, anything like that, that you are definitely not alone. And it is a very unfortunate thing that happens over and over again, even nowadays. For some folks in these relationships, being blamed by other people for the behavior of their narcissistic partner was often a source of further shaming in this relationship. You were already being shamed by the narcissistic person and then facing it again from the world at large. All of this can also help you understand why healing can feel so difficult. Listen, there isn't much to do to change this dynamic, because this tendency to blame folks who are in these relationships, it's not going anywhere. But understanding that it will happen and being clear on what is really happening in the relationship may help you feel a little bit more sane. Listen, it's always easier to blame the other person in a narcissistic relationship. It's just important for you to get it so you don't take it on. But none of this is easy. Thanks again.